An innocent man sat in a jail cell for 18 days. While he was still in it, the man who killed her handed police his phone. To prove he had nothing to hide, they copied it. Nobody knew whose it was. This is how the wrong man almost paid for what another man did. May 21st, 2016. A Saturday morning in Bellevue, Wisconsin. A farmer walking the edge of his field stops mid-step. Something at the tree line is wrong. His voice on the 911 line is the sound of an ordinary day ending. He tells the dispatcher, "We just found a human body. A woman. Face down near the tree line where the road can't see. No wallet, no phone. Almost nothing to say who she was, except a pair of socks and a pink paper wristband from a bar." 3 miles away, in a town called Ledgeview, a man had already been on the phone with police that day. He was trying to report his girlfriend missing. Within 48 hours, that man was in a cell. Investigators believed they had their answer. Most people who heard about the case believed it too. The boyfriend. It's always the boyfriend. He sat in that cell for 18 days. He didn't do it. And the man who did was nobody's suspect. No one was looking for him. No one knew his face, or his name, or that he had ever crossed paths with the woman in the field. He should have vanished into the noise of the world. He made one mistake. Not in the dark. Not that night. He made it 18 days later, in daylight, in front of a police officer, while trying to look like an innocent man. And what that mistake created would sit in a file, unread, for months, waiting for a name. Stay with this one, because before it's over, you'll understand how certainty nearly buried the wrong man, and how the guilty one, carefully, politely, and on the record, built the case against himself. To understand what was lost in that field, you have to see the night before it. Friday, May 20th. A concert in Green Bay, and after it, the bars downtown. Nicole VanderHeyden was 31. Nikki, to everyone who loved her. A substitute teacher who had spent 4 years in Green Bay's elementary and middle school classrooms, and the rare kind of adult who genuinely liked explaining things to children. Science was her subject. A close friend would remember running beside her while Nikki recited the periodic table out loud, element by element, for the joy of it. She had 3 children. The youngest, a baby boy, was 6 months old. His father was the man she was out with that night. Doug Detrie, 35, the man she shared her Ledgeview home with. A babysitter was at the house to watch the baby. The night was supposed to be simple. Music, friends, a few drinks, home. Witnesses at the concert saw a couple having fun. One woman who was there testified she noticed no argument at all. Whatever was coming had not arrived yet. It arrived at the bars. At a place called the Watering Hole, Doug ran into old friends, and among them was a woman. Nikki saw them talking, and it landed wrong. Investigators would later describe her as set off, angry. She left with part of the group and moved down the street to another bar, the Sardine Can, while Doug stayed behind. Surveillance cameras caught her there, dancing, talking, still out with her friends, and still texting Doug. The messages were not kind ones. He said he would come meet her. Midnight passed. He didn't come. At 12:30 in the morning, her phone went dead. Battery gone, mid-argument, midnight. Hold on to that phone, because a phone is going to decide this entire case, and it isn't hers. Sometime after her screen went dark, Nikki left the Sardine Can and started walking. A friend followed her out and tried to talk her back inside. She refused. She was a grown woman, angry at a man she loved, on a street she knew, in a city she had lived in all her life. Her friends watched her walk up the block and turn out of sight. Nikki walked away from a bar she'd been dancing in an hour earlier, angry at a man she loved. Before we go on, in the comments, tell us what you believe happened in the next 3 hours. Every theory you're about to type was, for 18 days, the official one. Doug got home at 2:40 in the morning. The babysitter was still there. Nikki wasn't. He told the sitter he didn't know where she was, that her phone was going straight to nothing, and he asked her to keep trying the number. Morning came with no answer and no Nikki. Her sister woke to a message from Doug, asking if she'd heard from her. She hadn't. She started calling too, and got the same dead line as everyone else. By that afternoon, Doug was reporting Nicole VanderHeyden missing. Officers came to the couple's home in Ledgeview. They noted he looked rough, hungover from the night out. He walked them through the evening, the concert, the bars, the argument, the drive home without her. He didn't know that a farmer 3 miles away had already made a different call. Word of the body in Bellevue moved fast, the way it does in a place that size. Nikki's sister went to the house and found Doug there with his parents. When she heard a woman had been found in a field, she prayed, out loud, that it was anyone else. Then she called her own parents and told them to come. Identifying the woman took longer than it should have. What had been done to her made her nearly impossible to recognize. A forensic dentist was needed to say her name with certainty. The medical examiner's finding was that she had been beaten and strangled. We are not going to walk further into that room than the record requires. What matters is this: she fought. And she was 3 miles from home, in a field she had no reason to ever visit, without the clothes she had worn that night. The clothes surfaced along a highway on-ramp, and a few days later, a neighbor near Nikki's own home found something lying in the grass, a length of cord, stained with her blood. Prosecutors would come to believe it was the weapon. It had been there for days, steps from the life she'd been trying to get back to. Think about what that geography says. She made it back. After the bar, after the walking, after the dead phone, Nikki made it home, or nearly home. Whatever happened to her began at the one place she had every right to feel safe. Investigators descended on the couple's street. The area around the house was taped off, and neighbors watched officers work the yard on their hands and knees, combing the grass. Deputies went door to door, canvassing who saw what and when, and whether anyone heard anything in the smallest hours of Saturday morning. Here is what they did not have. Her phone had died at 12:30, in a bar, hours before she did. There was no signal trail to follow her home, no ping to mark the moment things turned. Nikki's own phone could not testify. Remember that. Because someone else's could, and already had, and nobody knew it yet. And when investigators looked at that place, they found what seemed to be the rest of the story. What appeared to be blood in the garage, what appeared to be blood in a car, a boyfriend she had been publicly fighting with hours earlier. 2 days after the farmer's call, deputies arrested Doug Detrie. There is a version of every case that assembles itself. Nobody has to build it. A couple fights in front of witnesses. She goes missing. She turns up dead. He was the last person anyone can place near her. Each fact slots into the next, and the story clicks shut like a door. For 18 days, Doug Detrie lived inside that story. Those were the same days Nikki's people were learning to live inside theirs. Her family gathered at her parents' home in Green Bay, and the words they found for reporters were the words of people still underwater. A nightmare, they called it. A numbing kind of pain. Her sister spoke of a bright light gone from their lives, and of 3 children who had not yet understood that their mother was never walking back in. Friends set up 2 memorial funds, one for the funeral, one for the kids. And through all of it, in the same rooms, In the same conversations, the other sentence kept getting said. The boyfriend. They arrested the boyfriend. He said he was innocent. He said he had come home, gone to bed, and learned the rest along with everyone else. The county held him while the lab work ran, preparing for the murder charge everyone assumed was coming. Outside the jail, the certainty hardened into common knowledge. The boyfriend did it. What else was there? Then the results started coming back, and the story that had clicked shut began to open, one latch at a time. The blood in the car was not Nicole's. The blood on the floor was not human at all. And on her clothing, and on the cord, dropped in the grass near her home, analysts found DNA from a male who was not Doug Detrie. Not a partial echo of him, a different man entirely, a man with no name. There was one more thing, and it is the detail this case became famous for. So let's get it exactly right. When officers first questioned Doug at his home, a detective noticed the Fitbit on his left wrist. A step counter, quietly logging his body's movement all night. Nobody had planned for it. It was simply there. A witness Doug didn't know he had hired. When investigators pulled that data, it showed a handful of steps during the hours Nikki was killed. The pattern of a man shuffling to bed, not a man beating someone to death, moving her to a vehicle, driving to a field, and walking back across it in the dark. The legend that grew around this case says the Fitbit freed him. The reruns still say it. The file says something more precise. The Fitbit agreed with him. What freed Doug Detrie was blood that refused to be Nicole's, and the DNA of a stranger on the weapon. When the murder charge never came, and the county released him after 18 days, it was because the evidence had stopped pointing at him, and started pointing at a ghost. But understand what release did not mean. It did not mean apology. It did not mean the story that had closed around him came apart in other people's minds the way it had in the lab. He went home to a house that had been a crime scene, to a baby son whose mother was gone, and to a community where the boyfriend did it had been said out loud too many times to unsay. Somewhere in Green Bay, the man whose DNA was on the cord went about his life. 10 weeks would pass before anyone knew his name. He could have spent those 10 weeks being careful. What he actually did was volunteer. The version of this case you've heard ends with a fitness tracker. The version in the court file is stranger, and it's the one that matters. If you want the record instead of the rerun, subscribe to Crime from Within. Cases like Nikki's deserve to be checked, not just retold. To see the mistake, you have to leave the murder case entirely. Forget the field, the cord, the nameless DNA. Come instead to a small, tired piece of ordinary police work, the kind that fills a department's Tuesday, June 8th, 2016. Green Bay police are untangling a mess around a borrowed SUV. A Chevy Blazer, belonging to a retired couple, has had a bad month. Reported stolen after their house guest left it unlocked with the keys inside. Tied to a hit-and-run complaint, and then a vehicle fire. The last man known to drive it was that house guest, a big man in his late 30s, who had been renting an upstairs room from them for $100 a month since arriving in town that winter. He was behind on the rent, behind on his share of the phone bill. The couple had, at one point, bought him a bus ticket back to where he came from. He never used it. He stayed. One more detail about that house guest's Friday, May 20th, and it came, 2 years later, from his own mouth on a witness stand. That evening, he said, he joined the couple for a fish fry at their favorite restaurant. Afterward, they stopped at a mall, where he picked up a new cell phone. His ex-wife back east was cutting him from the family plan, so the new phone went onto his landlord's account instead. By his own testimony, the phone he carried into that night was hours old. It would remember the night better than anyone in it. An officer sat down with him about the blazer. Routine questions. Where were you that night? And here is where the man made his choice. He wanted the officer to believe him, so he offered proof. He said he had spent that evening at a bar, texting back and forth with a woman, and his phone would show it. Go ahead, he said. Look, the officer took him up on it. And Green Bay police procedure being what it was, they didn't glance at a message thread and hand it back. With his written consent, they downloaded the phone, cloned it. The full contents, copied into an evidence file for a minor property case. And then the phone was returned, and the man walked out, having successfully looked like someone with nothing to hide. He had just handed the police the murder case. He didn't know it. They didn't know it. The file was opened, logged, and shelved. 18 days after Nicole VanderHeyden was killed, a complete digital record of her killer's movements on the night she died was sitting inside a police department, indexed under a case about a blazer. It waited there through June, through July. Those were strange weeks in the house, where he rented the upstairs room, though no one living in it knew that yet. The retired couple followed the VanderHeyden case on the television news, the way the whole city did. The husband would later testify to something that sits differently once you know the ending. He and their house guest had watched that coverage together. The murder of Nicole VanderHeyden, playing in the living room. Her killer on the couch. By summer's end, the couple had had enough of him for entirely ordinary reasons. The rent, the phone bill, the blazer, and he moved on to a friend's couch across town. Then, in August, the state crime lab finished coaxing a usable profile from the DNA on Nikki's sock and ran it against the national database. The database answered with a name. It belonged to a 38-year-old who had come north from Virginia 4 months before Nikki died. A fresh start, he called it. He had worked in a restaurant, then in landscaping. He drank at a bar called Richard Cranium's a few minutes down the street from the sardine can where Nikki was last seen. He and Nicole VanderHeyden had never met before that night. No relationship, no history, no motive anyone could have found by studying her life. Because he was not in her life. He was only near it. Detectives began building their file on him. And almost immediately, they found the other one. June 8th, the blazer, the consent form, the clone. When Brown County investigators opened that copied phone and then pulled the account records behind it, they found something most people carrying a smartphone in 2016 didn't realize existed. A Google feature, quietly logging location. Not just cell towers, Wi-Fi points, and GPS coordinates. A breadcrumb trail, time-stamped. This was new ground. The case would come to be described as one of the first murder prosecutions in the country to turn on evidence like this. A trial where the key witnesses were devices, testifying through data about people who thought the night had no witnesses at all. And the trail said this. On the night of May 20th, into the morning of the 21st, his phone was in the bar district while Nikki was there. Between roughly 3 and 4 in the morning, it was on her street. Outside the home she shared with Doug. Later, it was at the field off Hoffman Road, where the farmer would find her after sunrise. Then, it was at the on-ramp where her clothes were dumped. Every station of that night, in order, self-reported by the device in his own pocket, and preserved by the police themselves, at his own invitation, before they ever knew he existed. According to the criminal complaint, the phone held one more detail. In the days after the murder, it had been used to open a news article about the killing of Nicole VanderHeyden. Not once, over and over. On September 8th, 2016, they arrested him. A fresh DNA swab was run against everything from the scene. It matched her body, her clothing, and the cord, not in one place, but in 16. The couple who had housed him learned it from the news like everyone else. That September, the wife went to the sheriff's office herself, trying to square the man from the upstairs room, the one who'd watched the coverage beside them, with what the file now said he was. The stranger finally had a name, and when his trial came, he stood up in that courtroom, raised his hand, took the oath, and told 12 jurors exactly who had killed Nicole VanderHeyden. He named Doug Detrie. Before a single juror was seated, the defense tried to kill the file. His lawyers argued the phone clone had been taken for one investigation and used for another, that without a fresh warrant, everything it produced should be thrown out of court. The judge let it in. Hold on to that ruling. It is not finished mattering. The trial opened in February 2018. Judge John Zakowski presiding, and the defendant did something most defendants never do. He took the stand and told the jury a story. In his telling, the digital trail wasn't a lie. It just meant something else. Yes, he had met Nikki that night. He claimed she came out of the bar and they hit it off. Yes, his phone sat outside her house at 3 in the morning. He said he had driven her home, and that in the car, things became intimate and consensual. And then, he told the jury, came a blow to the back of his head, knocked out cold. When he came to on the ground, Nikki was lying there bloodied, and Doug Detrie was standing over her with a gun. Doug, he testified, forced him to help move her body to the field. That was his story, under oath. Why tell no one? He had an answer for that too. He told the jury he was on probation in Virginia for grand larceny, and that leaving the state had violated it. Coming forward meant prison. Then he read that the boyfriend had been arrested, and figured the matter had settled itself. The defense built the rest around him. They went at Doug Detrie on the stand, and they did not go gently. He had showered, they pointed out, before investigators reached the house that day. Why? He'd sent Nikki a Snapchat the day after she vanished, a picture of himself and their son. He admitted, under oath, that he sent it to see when she would open it. There had been blood in the car, blood on the garage floor, a public fight hours before she died, and a motive that belonged to Doug alone. In closing, his lawyer stood a single word up in front of the jury. Motive. And Doug Detrie had to sit through it. He testified in that courtroom. The night, the search, the calls that went nowhere. He had been arrested for this murder, jailed for it, released without so much as a charge. Now he listened while the man accused of killing Nikki told 12 jurors it had been Doug all along, in his own front yard. The state took the story apart with the file. The Fitbit came back, and this time its role was stated properly. It's worth pausing here, because the court itself drew a line. The defense attacked the device's reliability, and Judge Zakowski partly agreed. The sleep tracking data was excluded from the trial. What the jury heard was the step count, and the step count said that during the window in which Nikki was beaten, strangled, driven 3 miles, and carried into a field, the man supposedly forced to help do it registered almost nothing. A few steps, a man in bed. There was the matter of shoes. A detective testified to a distinctive tread pattern on Nikki's body, a herringbone, consistent with a style of Air Jordans. Doug's shoes were examined. Her DNA was not on them. The defendant, jurors heard, had bought himself a brand new pair while staying at a friend's place that September, right around the time of his arrest. And there was the story itself. The prosecutor put it to the jury plainly. Here was a defendant, 6'7", and none of it frail, asking them to believe he had been knocked unconscious by a blow that left no mark on his head. asking them to believe a jealous boyfriend committed a murder this ferocious while his own step counter barely moved. And then everything the story required afterward. A man who helps hide a body under duress, tells no one, goes shoe shopping, and reads about the case, again and again, in silence. Against that story stood 16 points of DNA, walked through for the jury by a state crime lab analyst, one location at a time, a bloodied cord, a time-stamped trail through every scene of the crime, and the medical examiner who told the jury Nikki had been alive and fighting through what was done to her. When the defense pressed her on whether her findings could fit something consensual, her answer closed that door. What she found, she said, suggests assault, not consent. The state argued what the physical record suggested, that he wanted Nikki, that she refused him, and that he punished her for it. In the end, he was the only person in the courtroom whose account required the evidence to bend. The jury was out for about 3 hours. Guilty. First-degree intentional homicide. Judge Zakowski polled them one by one, and 12 times the answer came back the same. Through his attorneys, Doug Detrie said afterward that he was grateful the jury had seen through the attempt to hang Nikki's murder around his neck a second time, and he thanked the investigators who found the man who actually took her. The verdict answered the only question a trial is built to answer: who? It had no way to measure what had been taken. That accounting was still coming, and when it arrived, even the judge would struggle with it. Before the sentence, sit for a moment with who was actually lost, not the case, the person. Nicole VanderHeyden found her joy in small, unglamorous places: hiking, nature walks, taking her kids to the zoo. Her obituary says family came first with her, always. And the people who filled her parents' home that first week said the same thing in their own words. Her sister called her an absolutely amazing person. A friend talked about the energy she carried into a room, the laugh you could pick out from across it, the way she threw herself whole into whatever she loved. What she loved was teaching. 4 years of other people's children, in classrooms all over Green Bay, a substitute who wanted to be there, who could make science feel like a secret worth being let in on. The periodic table, recited from memory, on a morning run. That is who was walking up that street when the cameras lost her. When she died, the school district she had served put out a formal statement. A valued colleague and friend, grateful for her commitment to children. Deepest condolences. Institutions choose their words carefully. The classrooms she'd stood in felt it in plainer ones. Her 3 children lost their mother. The youngest was 6 months old, a boy who will only ever know her through what other people can carry to him. At the sentencing in May 2018, her family stood up one by one. Her mother told the court the loss had left them shells of the people we were. Her father asked the judge to show no mercy. Doug Detrie submitted a letter of his own, calling the man a danger who should never walk free. He had come into the courtroom that day in orange, and before the hearing began, reporters watched him laughing with his own defense team. When the family's statements ended, no one rose to speak on his behalf. Not one person. Given the chance to speak for himself, the man who killed her said nothing. Judge Zakowski did not say nothing. He called it the most brutal murder ever committed by a single person in the history of Brown County. He reached, for a moment, toward the man's past. A kid once, an athlete, a father, some good in there somewhere, and said the impossible part was holding that person and this crime in the same mind. That, the judge told him, is not human. He said that if Wisconsin had a death penalty, this crime would merit it. And then he handed down the closest thing the law allowed. life, with no possibility of parole. His words to the defendant, "You have to die in prison." One more piece of the man's past had surfaced along the way, and it deserves to be stated carefully. In 1998, in Virginia, he had stood trial for a killing, and a jury acquitted him. That verdict stands, and it means what it means. In the eyes of the law, he arrived in Wisconsin, an innocent man. Nicole VanderHeyden crossed his path 4 months later. The conviction did not end the argument. It moved it. His appeal went to the Wisconsin Supreme Court, and what the justices were actually arguing about was a single sheet of paper, a consent form signed in his own hand by a man trying to look innocent about a stolen blazer. Did that signature let police open his phone months later for a murder without ever going back for a warrant? In June 2021, the court said yes, the conviction stood. But the vote was 4-3, and the three did not mince words. The dissent argued his consent covered one investigation, not every investigation forever. That opening the file for a different case, without a warrant, crossed a constitutional line, and that the evidence should never have reached the jury at all. Sit with what that means. The detail that caught Nicky's killer, the file that knew his name before anyone else did, survived at the state's highest court by a single vote. His guilt is affirmed, and it is final. The map was real. The DNA was real. And still, the method divides the very people whose job is to draw that line. The next case built this way may be decided the other way. Then there is Doug Detrie, the man the assembled story chose first. What those 18 days cost him exists on paper because he had to itemize it for the court. In the restitution filings after the conviction, he documented lost wages, counseling, childcare, funeral expenses, attorney's fees, the running price of defending yourself against something you did not do. More than $250,000 in line items, standing in for a year no line item can describe, jailed for the murder of the woman he loved, released into a town that had convicted him at its kitchen tables, then accused all over again, to his face, from a witness stand. The file cleared him. Being believed took longer, and for some people, it may never have finished happening at all. And that is the part of a wrongful arrest no lab result reverses. The story closes around a man in days. It comes apart over years. Nicky's family filed for restitution too, alongside the state's crime victim fund. Whatever number they wrote down, the thing they actually lost recites the periodic table on a morning run, somewhere out of everyone's reach. As for the man himself, he sits today in a maximum security prison. At the restitution hearing, his own lawyer told the court he earns about $8 a month there. Through counsel, he still maintains his innocence. The courts have answered, and the sentencing court attached one more order to his file. Easy to miss and hard to forget. He is never to profit from what he did. If his story is ever sold, a documentary, an interview, a book, the district attorney's position is that every cent of it should flow to the people he took Nicky from. Whatever his version of that night turns out to be worth, the court decided in advance that it will never be worth anything to him. So here is what this case leaves you holding. The man who killed Nicole VanderHeyden was invisible. No motive, no history, no place in her world. The exact shape of a killer that cases go cold over. He was caught because for 20 minutes, one June afternoon, in front of one police officer, he wanted to look like an innocent man, and volunteered the one witness that cannot soften its story. And then the file sat there for 10 weeks, knowing everything, telling no one, waiting for someone to ask. Somewhere right now, evidence is sitting in a file, waiting for a name to find it. If that thought stays with you, the way it stays with us. Subscribe and send this to the person who still believes the obvious suspect is always the right one. Because an assembled story clicks shut in days, and 18 days is a very long time to be on the wrong side of the door.